Hello, my name is Jacques Chevalier. Welcome to Methods for Participatory Action Research. This video clip is about process design, a systems approach that helps select, combine, and adapt tools in a flexible design for participatory action research. There are 6 steps to follow. The first is to define the general setting and decide which of the following 3 scenarios applies most closely. The scenarios reflect different levels of uncertainty and varying degrees of complexity. Your process design will need to adapt accordingly. Scenario 1 applies to situations that are highly predictable and generally favorable. This is the plan and implement scenario, where objectives are clearly defined and shared by all key stakeholders. It means you can plan most activities in advance with considerable detail. Scenario 2 applies to situations that are complex and involve multiple stakeholders. These are rife with challenges and uncertainty. People's general and specific objectives may diverge and may require negotiations, compromise, and change over time. Information and knowledge about key factors and stakeholder response may be incomplete. Links between causes and effects may not be linear and straightforward. This makes the situation unpredictable and even messy. Continuous planning based on working hypotheses and close monitoring of results may be needed, with action plans adjusted as needed. Scenario 3 involves situations that are so urgent that only immediate events can be planned. The process design for this situation is an ad hoc intervention focused on a single or one-off event and plans to follow up immediately afterwards. By the way, Order and Chaos in Module 1 can help you identify the scenario that best describes the situation your plans need to adapt to. Is it somewhat chaotic, or is it conducive to orderly change? Step 2 is to define the scope and goals of the action inquiry and expected results. These should align with the main question that prompted the investigation in the first place. A good question that has strategic value and usefulness for those conducting the inquiry. This is not the same as raising an interesting question, the kind that is typically addressed in curiosity-driven research. Many questions are interesting, but only a few can drive action plans worth pursuing. When designing an action inquiry, previous conversations and conclusions must also be taken into account. This is step 3. Previous planning may revolve around the allocation of resources and time dedicated to the inquiry, and also who needs to be involved. Prior decisions and inputs may also help you define the roles that participants, facilitators, and key stakeholders should play in the planning phase and in the overall inquiry. Some things are fixed in advance, so it is best to lay them out. Step 4 is to identify more specific questions the action inquiry must answer. Take care to define these with concepts and in a language that is meaningful to the participants. Unpack different aspects of the main or general question, and then clarify and prioritize each of them as precise questions. Put these questions on separate index cards so you can organize the questions and sub-questions in a logical sequence. Ask yourself how the answer to one question serves as the input to the discussion that follows. This approach, based on input-output reasoning, is relatively unimportant in conventional research involving human subjects. By contrast, it is a crucial task when designing an action-oriented process. Questions need to be in the right order. This allows for progressive building of consensus among stakeholders, guided by an overall purpose and a commitment to follow up questions and action. In step 5, search for and select a tool or tools that will help to answer each specific question and define all the detailed steps and procedures needed. Decide how deeply to go into each question, the time frame, and also the kind of technology needed. Determine what is the right balance of quantitative data, gathering, formal analysis, description, and storytelling. Avoid using tools or ready-made methodologies that seem to fit to all situations. Questionnaires, interviews, and focus groups can be useful, but they may be a recipe for failure when innovative and participatory tools are needed. As Maslow used to say, I suppose it is tempting, if the only tool you have is a hammer, to treat everything as if it were a nail. End of quote. To achieve its purpose, every inquiry must develop its own methodology and invent, mix, and adapt a wide range of tools to fit the situations and purpose at hand. Select, sequence, and scale tools accordingly using tools from our handbook and other sources. Finally, for step 6, consider what kind of reporting on the group discussions is needed and how the documentation will be used after the action inquiry. Be careful not to let reporting slip away in the experience of sharing in the moment. Note-taking and records may be needed to inform follow-up actions. Plan for this. Consider documenting the following elements: the context or situation in need of attention, the purpose of the action inquiry, a summary of the process, a descriptive analysis of the findings, an interpretation of the results, follow-up actions identified by the participants, and observations regarding limitations of the study and what went well or difficulties met during the process. Focus on what information is really needed. Don't assume that more documentation is always better than less. In closing, 3 more points should be made. Some activities may not require a formal inquiry or detailed plan at all because there's no pressing need. The situation to be addressed may be relatively clear, or results can be monitored through day-to-day tracking using informal exchanges, for instance. Another important point is that process design does not rule out using familiar and well-established ways of doing things. Conventional procedures and local customs may be exactly the right thing to do in some situations and work well enough for the task at hand. These include established or culturally appropriate ways to gather and analyze information, create priorities, resolve problems, take action, and interact with others. In some cases, the best action inquiry design consists in just doing things the way they are usually done. Introducing new tools or methods is never an end in and of itself. Finally, the design process often requires going back and forth between steps. Far from being linear, coming up with a good design is iterative and subject to change.